Good morning. Welcome to the December Committee of the Whole meeting. Our first item on the agenda is a consent calendar. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is appearance of visitors. Looks like we maybe have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 visitors. Before we get started, I'll have Mr. Lewis to give us the guidelines for speakers. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As each speaker's name is called, he or she should proceed to the podium at the end of the board's dais, where there is a microphone and a light system. Each speaker has up to 3 minutes to speak to the board. The light system will be green for the first 2 minutes, turn yellow when 1 minute remains. In keeping with policy KCA, abusive language or personal attacks aimed at students or staff members will not be permitted. All speakers are expected to behave in an orderly and respectful manner. The board will not engage in discussion with the speaker or respond to the speaker's comments. The superintendent will designate a member of the staff to respond to each speaker in an appropriate and timely manner.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Our first speaker is David Heinsworth.
Good morning. My name is Dave Heinsworth. Thank you all for this opportunity. And I would just like to take a couple minutes here to point out some numbers from VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Effects Reaction System. The number of adverse reactions, COVID-19 vaccines, December 2020 to present, is over 927,000. That is a lot of adverse reactions for 1 year of vaccine usage. The number of deaths is over 19,000. The number of deaths for all vaccines combined from this year, dating back to the year 1990, is 9,319. So the number of deaths for the COVID-19 vaccines is more than double the number of deaths associated with all other vaccines combined since the year 1990. And that's simply the deaths. There are doctors on record inside the HHS who state that they do not report anything to VAERS simply because they do not have the time or they do not care to. So these numbers probably represent less than 10% of the actual numbers that are going on out there in the world. The number of flu deaths for the last complete flu season were 33. The number of deaths for the last flu season for COVID-19 were 5,576 in the United States alone. The number of adverse reactions from the flu vaccine last flu season, 9,709. For the COVID vaccine, 529,838. The risk of adverse reaction from the COVID vaccine is 54 times greater than the flu vaccine. The risk of dying from the COVID vaccine is 169 times greater than the flu vaccine. And that is directly from the VAERS website. This is from WebMD. November 22nd, 2021, the number of COVID-19 deaths recorded so far in 2021 has surpassed the total for 2020, according to the latest data from Johns Hopkins University. About 385,000 were reported in 2020, and 386,000 have been reported this year. What that means is this: if you all go through with getting the students of the schools to promote this to the other young people, then they are actively participating in killing other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heinsworth. Our next speaker is Joan Boyce. Excuse me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joan Boyce. I believe in dealing with facts. I would like you all to give me your attention and listen carefully to what I'm saying, because the last meeting that I attended, I'm sorry to say, was filled with mass confusion and moral ineptitudes. Everybody didn't seem like they knew what they were even voting for, and that kind of scared me. Number one, it's 100% undisputed fact that Dr. Fauci, with our tax dollars, paid for gain-of-function research. which caused millions of people all over the world to die from COVID-19. That's a fact. Dr. Fauci has been all over the map. Every time he speaks, it's one mask, no mask, two masks, just get the vaccine and COVID is gone. Get the vaccine and wear a mask. And now, since the vaccine only lasts about 6 months, boosters. I mean, what's next? Boosters every 6 months? It will never end. Dr. Fauci is clearly a compulsive liar and a sadistic animal torturer. Are any of you aware of Dr. Fauci's sick experiments on beagles? 40 of them. This is fact. What he did was have their vocal cords were cut so they couldn't scream while they were helplessly held captive as thousands of flies were eating their eyes and their faces. Can you imagine the pain they suffered? They were left in pain for 9 weeks of additional suffering. Baby monkeys are kept in tiny cages where they are forced to suffer excruciating pain. It's horrible. I watched all the videos of it. It's been on TV. This is the man that all of you trust, the man you are allowing to dictate little children be injected with this so-called vaccine. Do any of you even know what's in the vaccine? No, you don't. Yet you want little children to be injected, then most likely having to get boosters over and over. COVID-19 vaccine trials only started in the summer of 2020, and it's not clear if these vaccines will have long-term side effects. What liability are you voters who want to approve this going to take? None. What happens if a child gets very sick or dies? What happens if a child gets a debilitating heart condition? Do any of you want that on your conscience? Now you're turning getting a vaccine into an American Idol contest. Sing it to win it. 10,000, 5,000, and 3,000 prizes for their schools. Talk about bribing little children. Who thinks up this outrageous stuff? You're messing up children's heads and their lives. Personally, I think it's sick and I think it's shameful. You all need to take a long look in the mirror and rethink all of this. Now, Chairman Meeks.
Thank you, Ms. Boyce.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Next speaker is Cynthia Horner.
Thank you all for this opportunity. Yes, I'm Dr. Cynthia Horner. I've been a chiropractor in Greenville for 28 years, and my experience is with pregnant women, infants, children, and families. Before I was a chiropractor, what did I do? I was a teacher. What did I teach? I taught health. DHEC and South Carolina Department of Education are acting as if it's perfectly normal to use children for medical experiments, and that's exactly what this is. Experiments which carry with them some serious side effects and even death. Anytime you ask someone to make a decision, they must have all the information. Censoring information and only presenting one side, as DHEC and the AMA have done, is nothing less than propaganda. Have school board members taken the responsibility to tell the parents and children what they're really jingling about? Do they have all the information? Information such as, it was 18,000, now 19,000 deaths as an effect of this COVID vaccine. 10,000 reports of blood clots. They could jingle about that. Or 3,000 cases of myocarditis and pericarditis. That's an easy one. A lot of things rhyme with carditis, with itis on the end. 3,000 cases of Bell's palsy. 2,000 reports of anaphylaxis that was life-threatening or caused death. And that's unfortunate. Nothing rhymes with anaphylaxis. 700 reports of Guillain-Barré syndrome. I'm sure that those who suffered these side effects will find the jingles very amusing. The big question is, what are we teaching our students by involving them in this medical experiment? Sounds to me like we're saying, sacrifice yourself for the better good. Sacrifice your needs and well-being for the needs of the state. But wait, that sounds like socialism. Oh yeah, it is socialism. Maybe that's the point. We're certainly not teaching them to value their bodies, their freedoms. In America, don't we teach? Don't give up your freedom for the better good, because freedom is the better good. Where's the jingle contest that teaches kids to take care of their bodies? The jingle contest that teaches them that their immune system is strong and capable, and it surveys the environment and helps them adjust to it and keeps them safe and healthy. No, there's no money or power in that. We must teach them they are weak. They need masks and drugs to stay on this planet. If this is what the school wants for a disease with a 99.1 survival rate, it's obvious that it's not about their health. $10,000 to the first place school, $5,000 to the second place school, $3,000 to the third place school. School board members, I ask you, how many zeros is their health worth? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horner. Next speaker is Mary Ann Coleman.
Good morning. I'm Mary Ann Coleman, grandmother of 6 in the Greenville County Schools. I've spoken here before, but I thought I'd better give you a little bit of what's been in my mind all night long. So everybody's talking about this Sing It to Win It. It's a new propaganda campaign to get our youngest generation jabbed. For what reason exactly? Are we so desperate to win favor with the pharmaceutical companies that we stoop to take bribes? To use our youngest, most vulnerable population that relies on us, their parents, their grandparents, teachers, school leaders, to lead them through life making good choices for their health, safety, and education. It's unconscionable to steer them by using a tawdry mechanism such as a contest, creating a jingle to promote a so-called vaccine in hopes of funding their school music program. Seriously? And now you are also enticing the music teachers to be complicit with this game plan. Will DHEC take the responsibility for any of the mishaps or fallout from pushing a biological agent on our school children? What about you? Will you take the responsibility if a child has a major repercussion in response to our schools promoting this jab? Using the talents of our gifted students to run a campaign to promote a shot that isn't even recommended by most pediatricians for our younger ones. Our children have strong constitutions and have a 99.98% chance of recovery from COVID if they would even get it. All I can think of is how the Nazis marched the families into the compounds, promising them showers to get rid of the dirt and grime from riding in cattle cars, only to gas them to death. Pretty gruesome indeed. But we're not there yet, but it could start with a jingle. So, in the words of the great Nancy Reagan, in response to our country's illegal drug use, just say no to drugs. Well, you know that campaign didn't work. But we could start with just say no to Molly. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Our next speaker is Courtney Epps.
My name is Courtney Epps, and I'm a mom of 6. I took my kids out of public school 7 years ago because I saw the evil and the dangers that were coming to play in our country. I did that before it was, before a lot of other people were doing it. Now I see that we as a society have to pull our kids out of school. We have to create our own parallel universe. And here's the thing, I urge you guys today, I want you to understand that we're on your side if you are for God. And we don't have your back if you're not for God. And so there is a line being drawn in the sand right now that says you are either for God today or you are for Satan. And he said if his people come down and we pray that we can heal our nations, 2 Corinthians 7:14. And he also said, and I just want to share this with you, Lord, the nations are your inheritance and the uttermost parts of the earth your possession. Break the nations with your rod of iron. Let the kings and the judges of the earth be wise and serve the Lord with reverent awe, worshipful fear, and rejoice with trembling. See, I think we lost our fear in the Lord, and we stopped putting faith in God. in Jesus Christ. And we started putting faith in a vaccine and putting faith in a medical system. And if you go look up the caduceus and you look and see how it was created, you know that staff that the AMA logo has on it, the two serpents wrapped around. When in the Bible did it say that a serpent was good for you? We have to wake up. If you go look up what that is on Wikipedia, it will tell you that it's the staff that Hermes carried, who is a Greek god. It's also the staff that Iris carried, which was another god. And it's also the messenger god, which is a staff. And if you take and go to Google and just type up Baphomet, Baphomet, it will show you in the very center of this horn goat god, the AMA logo. See, we've been worshiping the wrong thing. We need to start worshiping God. And what you're doing to our children, I'm going to double what DHEC is giving to these school districts. I'm going to double it for children who don't take vaccines. I'm going to double it to create a jingle against the vaccines. So if you are worried about money, I just gave you a reason to not accept this deal. Whatever DHEC is created, I will double that and give it to the schools. We will do the exact same thing, but it will be a jingle against the vaccines. My mother was murdered along with the other 800,000 people in this country due to COVID protocol. She did not die of COVID, and no other person in this country has died of COVID. They've died of remdesivir poisoning. And then they're put on a ventilator for $39,000 for the hospital, and then they're given morphine, which paralyzes their diaphragm, and they drown to death. That is what is happening in this country. We need to put faith back in God. We need to stop fearing mankind. And vaccinia, this is the last thing.
Thank you, Ms. Epps.
It's the inoculable principle.
Thank you, Ms. Epps.
Cowpox.
Thank you, Ms. Epps. Ms. Epps, thank you.
Freemasons created vaccines. Go look that up on Freemasonry today.
Thank you, Ms. Epps.
Satan.
Ms. Epps,
That's what you're doing if you continue on with this vaccine stuff.
Thank you, Ms. Epps. That concludes our section for speakers. Our next section is building and grounds. Mr. Suddeth.
Oh, excuse me. We began with 3.01 Facilities Project Report. Dr. Oyster.
Thank you, Coach. Good morning. As you've noticed, we're in a little different order today. The reason being we have a hard start time at 10 a.m. for the individuals that are going to talk with you about redistricting. So we've changed things around in order to try to accommodate that. Although I don't think Colonel Carlin has anything new related to the facilities project update, I'd be glad to answer any question you might have about the information in your packet. And then he has an item following that, a sewer right-of-way easement. So certainly any question you might have about facilities project report, he'll be glad to answer.
Mrs. Caldwell, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. I have a question about our weight room projects.
Yes, ma'am.
We are building these nice weight rooms, but we are not supplying the equipment for the weight rooms. Why is that?
We have, with the exception of the new high school that we just built, who would have no athletic funds or pupil activity funds, we have never provided weight equipment for schools. We are looking at the possibility of making a recommendation for some support for that purpose with fund balance. We're looking at the amount that our external auditors gave to us, I guess, at the last month's meeting. So we may very well bring a recommendation to you to assist with that. But that has traditionally and always been a responsibility of each school's athletic program. And they all have weight rooms, and they all currently have weight equipment in those rooms.
As we know, some schools have booster clubs and some don't, and some have the opportunity to have funds donated for that. But I'm thinking about the schools that don't have that. And we're
That's why
building
we're
these.
looking at a process to provide support to not just a few schools, but to all schools, but that support may be based on a sliding scale.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else? If none, let's go to 3.02 Metropolitan Sewer Subdistrict right-of-way and easement request at Beck Academy. Dr. Royster?
It was Sudeth. Colonel Carlin, if you could summarize that, please.
Yes, sir. There is a Metro Connect has approached us about tying into sewer infrastructure that they own on the Beck Academy campus. It is in an area of the campus that we would have no future need for. It's actually down in very close to a drainage swale that is adjacent to the campus. If you're facing the campus, it's on the right side. It is to provide sewer service, as I understand it, for a future medical office park across the road. Metro has analyzed their projected sewer flow and determined that the infrastructure that they own that goes through our campus will certainly accommodate that. We have discussed that issue with Metro as well as REWA, and we do not have any concern that that would cause us problems down the road.
I move to approve a permanent sanitary sewer right-of-way easement as requested by Metropolitan Sewer Subdistrict at Beck Academy.
Second motion.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If none, those that are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Motion carries. That completes item 3.02. Mr. Chairman, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sudduth. That concludes our building and grounds section. Our next section is administration, Mr. Lewis. And when it reaches 10 o'clock or about 5 minutes to 10, we'll need to break, Mr. Lewis, so we can have our meeting with the persons on Zoom, okay? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so I think the plan is to start item 4.01, and then we may have to stop it and come back to it for board members' questions after the 10 o'clock session.
Great.
All right, so item 4.01 is the Aspiring Principal Institute. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. As a part of the evaluation process this year, there was some interest in us providing an update to our Aspiring Principals Institute program. And so Ms. Cap is here to do that today. Our presentation will be inside that time amount. So your adjustment, Mr. Lewis, I would suspect would be on the question side, because I believe our presentation is about 20 minutes. Ms. Cap?
Thank you for allowing me to share an overview of the Aspiring Principal Institute this morning. Our strategic plan emphasizes our district's priority to provide excellent teachers and principals, and we have created a continuum of development to prepare and support the leaders that serve our schools. Research has shown a clear link between the quality of the principal and student achievement, and teacher quality and principal leadership are the primary school-related influences on learning. A February 2021 report from the Wallace Foundation showed that the impact of an effective principal was nearly as large as that of an effective teacher, but they highlighted the larger scope of the principal's impact across the school. Our district wants to combine high-quality teaching with effective school leadership to continually improve outcomes for students. Originally named the Assistant Principal Institute, the Assistant Superintendents for School Leadership created the API, graduating the first class of 22 administrators in 2011. 8 of the assistants you see there became principals in our district, and 2 of them outside of Greenville County Schools. API provides professional development with a focus on instruction, management, and communication. This graphic represents our approach to leadership development and includes programming to strengthen the pool of candidates to serve our schools. In 2017, we expanded training opportunities for administrators. We redesigned and renamed our flagship program, now called the Aspiring Principal Institute. When an assistant principal wants to more deeply explore the principal's role, they will apply to API. Recently, we trained 36 mentors to provide off-site support to new assistant principals. 28 of those mentors are API graduates. Additional programming for administrators includes the Instructional Leaders Academy, focused on the skills needed to improve teaching and learning, and the assistant superintendents hold quarterly AAAP meetings where assistants share best practice and work together to solve common problems. These functions are the focus of a school-ready leader. An effective principal sets high standards and motivates teachers to excel in the classroom. The role is complex and demanding, and some API participants will decide that this work is not right for them. Throughout the program, they are engaged in learning focused on these requirements, and district leadership is able to observe their thinking in these areas. Almost all internal first-time principal selections are API graduates, and though not every grad will become a principal, each has provided feedback on areas for growth. Annually in March, we open the application process. We are looking for administrators who perform well in their current roles and who present promising management and instructional leadership practice. Applicants submit a resume and cover letter and must have the recommendation of their principal. The screening and interview process is aligned to the administrative evaluation model. Interviews are conducted by leaders who are successful school principals, and every applicant provides a written response to a school challenge. In redesigning the API, we deepen the focus on instructional leadership, problem solving, communication, and time with seasoned principals. Instruction is provided by central office department leaders and current principals, and participants earn nearly 60 hours of professional development credit. Principal supervisors serve as advisors. They assist goal setting and provide feedback and support for long-term planning. One of the most appreciated sessions in the API is on finance. Sitting principals share their perspective on what to do and what not to do, and leaders from the department provide further guidance on matters pertaining to personnel and dollar allocations. 109 principals have been selected in Dr. Royster's tenure. Of those, 31 were experienced principals coming from outside Greenville County, and 15 transferred from one Greenville principalship to another. 63 of those principals were promoted from assistant principal or administrative assistant to principal, and 58 of the 63 were API graduates. Not every leader who completes the API is going to pursue a principal's role. Of the 164 to date, 126, or 76%, have applied at least once. Nearly half of those who applied were promoted to principal, and most of those who promoted did so within 1 year. An additional 7 have become a principal outside this district. The API allows both participants and district leaders to assess individual strengths and weaknesses, and challenges as well. Not all API graduates are going to become principals, but these administrators grow as leaders, and the perspective gained from the experience improves their effectiveness no matter where they serve. Annually, we get feedback from the cohort on their API experience. This fall, in an effort to further improve the API, we sought input from sitting principals who are recent graduates of the program. Their thoughts are here. They particularly appreciate the shadowing experience and networking with the cohort and the assistant superintendents, and we are updating our modules to incorporate their suggestions. We invited a few of them to share with you directly. Didn't open it up.
So it was really awesome for me because
Okay,
I
so
moved.
It's only playing for me. Okay. Come do that.
Un momento.
So it was really awesome for me because I moved from kindergarten to the program director job at Fisher. So my network was very different because I gained friendships with middle school APs, but I didn't really know elementary APs because it had kind of shifted with my time. So it was really nice to get back with a group that was elementary, middle, and high.
The thing that had the greatest impact on me was getting to know all the assistant superintendents on a regular basis, having them present, getting to know their personalities, hearing their stories, their experiences, and realizing that it is truly a team effort once you become a principal, that they're all there to support you.
We had so many opportunities to revisit our values because as assistant principal, you're really a manager. You get what is delegated to you. But when you're a principal, you have to make so many decisions. And when you make those decisions, they have to come from a place of knowing where you are and being confident with that. I know we had opportunities to study. The book Culture Rise was one that was beneficial to us, where we did a book study on that. We met outside of school. So just being able to look at our values.
The opportunity to collaborate and network with other people going through the process gave me the opportunity to determine what kind of principal I was going to be and how I knew how I wanted to do things in the back of my mind, but really helping those come to fruition and formulating a plan of what that was going to look like when I moved into that seat.
Something that, as a principal, I think we all go through. It is, how to empower your faculty and staff because, the principal is a big job and you can't do it alone. So keep integrating that into the program because, there's just one principal, but there are many different leaders across the school. I talk with current principals in the district about how do we empower our staff to be able to carry out the mission and vision of the school.
You might have to help me bring this back.
Sir?
Might have to help me bring this back. It's jumping. Okay, good. That's you? Okay. All righty. So I mentioned that every year we receive feedback from the API participants. And so I want to end with the voices of participants from some of our end of year reflections. You'll see there their experience in the program. And that is all I have.
I don't think she dozed off right here.
You thought I'd passed out over here.
Thank you, Ms. Cap.
Yes, sir.
Do any board members have any questions? Mr. Sutta.
If I'm looking at principals, they're evaluated by whom?
Principals are evaluated by the assistant superintendents for whom they work, or they're supervised by those folks.
They have a year-end evaluation? Or is it
Assistant principals or principals? Let's back
Principals.
up. Principals are evaluated by the principal supervisors, and that's a year-end evaluation. They meet with them 3 times a year expressly for the purpose of looking at their goals and talking about progress toward those goals. That's how principals are supervised and evaluated.
When they do the evaluation, does a principal have to be an assistant principal before they can become a principal?
It would be rare for someone to move into a principalship, and I do not believe it has occurred in this county, who has never been an assistant principal or an administrative assistant.
I doubt there are any left. At one time, there would have been some in the county years and years ago. I don't think there are any left at this point still serving as principals. We've not promoted any, and that would be during my tenure and the time I've been here, which would include Dr. Fisher's tenure, so 17 years that hadn't happened. Back years ago, when there were few, if any, assistant principals, particularly at the elementary level, there would be people who would move directly from a classroom to principal. Hadn't happened in many years.
Does the principal have someone they can communicate with? Say, for example, another principal that was assigned to them, or do they just do that on their own?
No, sir. They would have both formal and informal mentors. You're talking about people who become a first-year principal, for example.
Principal, is there
whether
someone-
they are new to being a principal or new to the district and they're an experienced principal, they are assigned a principal mentor. They also go through an orientation period throughout the course of their first year where they can build relationships with not only their mentor, but with other new principals, as well as with experienced principals that come in and share with them various aspects of the principalship.
Do we have a budget for this program?
Yes, sir. We take it out of our regular staff development budget.
Can you tell me how much we spend?
We can send it to you. I don't have those figures for us in front of us today. There's not much cost to it because most all the work is done by our own employees.
Okay. I think it's a very worthwhile program, and I'm glad we have it. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Mr. Meek.
Thank you. Ms. Cap, would you go over the selection of candidates for the program again, please? And stress on it. Get down into the weeds for me a little bit, how you select those.
So in March, we opened the application period. Of course, we publicized that internally in the district. We only serve an API internal assistant principals or administrative assistants. We would prefer that they've had 3 years in the role, but that's not always the case. They submit a resume, which outlines their experience and the results of their experience. They submit a cover letter as well, and they have a recommendation from their current principal. We paper screen them. We call that paper screen. We look to see that they meet the qualifications. We are looking for those experiences in leading other adults and the results of that. And we're looking for both instructional leadership and operational leadership. They are then interviewed by the team of assistant superintendents and myself. We use the administrative evaluation model called PDEP and the themes within it to craft our questions. We're asking them to give us examples of when they have done certain things within those themes. And we try to get a real good feel for both how they think, what their philosophy is, their promise to be able to lead others in the potential principal's role long-term. And then they also give us a writing sample that is a written response to a leadership challenge. So we're looking for their judgment in response to that challenge, as well as their skill in communicating effectively in writing in response to such a challenge. So we interview them, and then typically we serve between 10 and maybe 14 assistant principals or administrative assistants per year in the API.
Tell me what the PDEP stands for.
Oh gosh, PDEP is, well, you shouldn't ask me that. It's the performance performance evaluation system for principals. And I'm trying to think what ADEPP means by itself, but that's the structure, that's the system. To the right of the screen, you'll see thematically what's in PDEP. I think you see 6 items there. We actually pose our questions directly out of PDEP, but they're folded within those 6 items. So professional leadership, there are 2 PDEP standards. There are 2 PDEP standards, and they are interpersonal leadership and professional leadership, and we fold them in there. I think it's performing it's performing and assisting the development of principals program.
If I might add, it might make this more clear. That's a state-required evaluation system.
The PDEP is?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So that's their acronym. We add things to our evaluation that's not required by the state, but just like there is a basic teacher evaluation system structured by the state, there is one for principals as well.
And Ms. Cap, you're in charge of this program or whatever it's called? API.
I coordinate and facilitate the program.
Okay.
Principals from across the district, department leaders, 2 of them sitting right over here at the table. They are the instructors for the program. And I collaborate with the assistant superintendents across the year to determine where they see principals who have best practice to share to bring to these monthly seminars.
And the acronym stands for Program for Assisting, Developing, and Evaluating Principal Performance.
And that's a state?
That's the SDE.
It's the required evaluation model. Now, I'm in trouble with Patty Fox now because I could not recite that to you, but Dr. Royster just got really big points.
I looked it up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Ms. Morrison-Fair. Ms. Morrison-Fair, we may stop during your questions, but we'll come back to you.
I think my question will be short. I love this process and I love the Institute. Have we ever thought about sending sitting principals back through this as a review? Because so many things change, students change, environments and cultures change.
Right.
And I think, I don't know if you do that already, but that's my question.
So if I can speak to that, the assistant superintendents for school leadership really take a teaching and coaching model or approach to their work. And so at minimum, in monthly breakout meetings after the big principals meeting, they meet with their level groups of principals. And in those monthly meetings, they are sharing updates for best practices. They certainly are attending to things that have bubbled up as a concern among the leadership in the county. And so they are working on that leadership all along. Formally in those monthly meetings, other principals bring best practices to share as well. So they're always collaborating. And then principal supervisors are in buildings a very large portion of their working time. or they're during the daytime. They are very often in the buildings. They are coming alongside principals in both formal and informal coaching conversations. They're in classrooms with principals. And of course, through text or phone, they're right there beside them all the time. So it's ongoing development in both formal meetings, informal conversation, coaching conversations, and presence and truly joint work with those principals. Those assistant superintendents are very engaged with each principal's work.
Thank you, Ms. Morse. Ms. Lynch.
Very quickly, what is the success rate of these assistant principals and administrative assistants? What is the success rate as far as completing and then getting principal positions?
So this,
I know you went over that, but
this slide, okay? Now this is unduplicated count fully. 164 persons by name have completed the academy or the institute, and roughly 76% have applied. Of that 126 who applied, almost half became principals in our county.
And are they current principals?
Let's see. I would have to go back and look at some data to tell you that. There are very few who are no longer principals.
Okay, and one more question. How long are they given a mentor when they become principals?
When new principals are hired, they are assigned a mentor. In our last 4 years, those mentors go through extensive formal training on how to support that principal, and they have that trained, skilled mentor, a colleague, for 2 years in a formal fashion. They meet across the year with them informally, and then the mentors and the new principals meet in networks, such that mid-January of this next year, all of the new principals from this year, to include outside principals who may have been veterans, and their mentors will come together, and they work in small groups also to support each other in what they're doing to solve problems that are commonly experienced.
One last question.
Yes.
Who are the mentors?
Who are the mentors? They are successful, seasoned principals in this district. They are folks who have demonstrated both the willingness and the disposition, if you will, to be able to care for someone else, to proactively seek to be available to someone, and who, even as they do so, are very careful to help that person think through problems, as opposed to just give them a quick answer.
Very much. I like this program. I'm glad we have it in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levinus-Wells. Ms. Goen-Caldwell.
One question.
Yes, ma'am.
I love that we have the API, and when she asked about the mentoring and the support, we were at a conference and they said that the educators, the thing that they want the most is support. So I would like to see us get a presentation on how we support all of our staffs in the schools and the educators, because I like that we support them and we have mentorship for this, but we also need to make sure that we are supporting all of our educators and our school staffs. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Sedith.
Is this a year-long program?
It is. The API is a year-long. It is an afternoon meeting, 2.5 hours monthly, and 4 days off-site. 2 of those days, they go to another principal's school, and they shadow that person. They actually shadow 2 different principals, spend the full day alongside a principal outside their own building and principal, and then 2 days are deep dive instructional leadership seminars.
Well, I've got to join this program at the beginning of a school year. What if it's a semester I decide I want to be a part of this program? Do I have to wait until the next school year?
If you would be asking to do that as an assistant principal, and this is a cohort program. They do lots of work together and we mix them up. They grow together. They also do some book studies off-site together. So you apply in the spring. If you do not apply and go into that cohort, but you decide in January, hey, I wish I had done that, then when March rolls around, you put your name in the hat and we take you through that selection process. So you really can't come in midstream.
I have to be certified as a principal.
You would have to be certified as a principal, as is every administrative assistant or assistant principal. And you must be a sitting assistant in a school in order to be eligible for the API.
Dr. Royster, do we transfer principals because of whatever the reason may be? I'm not talking about because of their doing the job correctly. I'm talking about if we decide that we need a principal somewhere else, then we got this principal that is in another area. Do we take principal out of that area, let's into a high-performing, into a less-performing school?
Yes, we've moved some number of principals. We can send you the data on how many. If you look at that hire data, out of that 109, 15 of them were transferred from one principalship to another, which would reflect, about 13%, something like that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. If there are no other questions, I have just one. If we could go back to the slide with so 126 people participated in API and applied to be a principal. And then 56 of them were hired out of that 126. So there's 70 who have participated in API and have at least started the process of applying to be a principal but weren't hired. I'm assuming some of those are because someone else also applied and they were a better fit at that school, but for at least half of these folks, they still are, I assume, pursuing an opportunity to be a principal. Are there additional mentoring and support opportunities available for those who went through API, who were deemed not to be selected to be a principal, but may still be interested in following that path for the future?
There are, and I thank you for asking. You might recall that I said, or that on the slide you would have noted that every one of these API graduates has an exit conference with the assistant superintendent. At that time, they talk about their long-term plans. The assistant superintendent will coach them a bit on the kinds of things they might improve upon. They're observing them all year long, okay? Now, as they apply to become a principal, when they sit in those screening teams and you, let's say you've got 8 or 9 applicants for principalship, not applicants, but people who go to interview, many times those API folks really stick out as stronger, stronger than those who have come from the outside who are still assistant principals. But if you'll note in Dr. Royster's statistics there, you've got principals who are selected from the outside who are already experienced principals. That's sort of hard to trump when you've never been a principal before and you're coming in wanting to do so. When they are not selected, to your direct question, you'll note when I spoke to you about the mentor program that 28 of the 36 folks who are supporting our new principals, they are API grads. To become a skilled mentor is to really learn to coach another adult, not only in the way they do things, those logistical things that new principals really need somebody to stand beside them for or reach out to about, but in the way they think about and tackle the things they look at each day, whether it's people, problems, just whatever problem. It's how they think about those things. And so to be able to do that alongside a colleague is a next level way of thinking and managing communication. So that is a next area of growth for them. And then we have folks who are wanting to be principals who may have applied and aren't yet principals. We engage them in other projects along the way. It in fact was several API folks who helped us to develop this new mentor program, or this new mentor program for these assistant principals. So they helped to develop it, and they are leaders in those programs with the network.
Well, one other thing, Mr. Lewis, in response to your question, it doesn't really have anything to do with API, but as a part of the interview process, the consistent throughout that process is the assistant superintendent to whom they report is present at each stage in the process, including when I meet with the finalist. So when particularly our internal candidates are not successful, one of the things that assistant superintendent does is follow up with that candidate to answer any question they might have, or to offer them suggestions as to how they might do better next time. And in some cases, it's simply a matter of they were not perhaps the most suitable choice for that school at that point in time. And you made this point in what you said, and might have gotten lost because of the question and the answer. But quite often, there might be three people sitting in front of me, and all three of them successfully completed API. Well, obviously, only one of them is going to get the nod, so to speak. So many times, they're competing with one another. And sometimes, to Ms. Cap's point, they're competing perhaps with an experienced principal. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruster. If there are no other questions, thank you, Ms. Cap.
Thank you.
Our next session starts at 10, so we will take a 5-minute recess and start back here at 10 a.m. Now a 4-minute recess and start back here at 10 a.m.
Thanks for your help.
No, I did nothing. Can I, now that this
All right, can you guys hear us okay in Columbia? Oh, hey.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. All right, thank you guys for joining us. We're going to call this meeting back to order. We're getting everybody back to their seats. I think we have with us 3 folks in Columbia. If you guys could introduce yourselves. I'm Derek Lewis, and I'm currently chairing this section of the meeting. So I think we're going to turn it over to you guys, but if you would mind introducing yourself first.
Hi, Derek. My name is Adam Demars, Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, the State GIS Coordinator. We got Victor Frontroth, who is our cartographer, and we have Mary Catherine Miller, who is our statistician and legal representation in here to help us keep ourselves in order.
Well, thank you guys for participating. So I think I understand we have time for you guys to do a presentation, and then I think we have a hard stop at 11. Is that correct? So you guys can take questions until 11. Is that the general plan?
Sure.
So what we'll do is let you guys do your presentation first, and then we'll just take questions until you have to get off the phone, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Thanks,
honestly,
Adam.
we have about 10 minutes worth of dialogue to go through, and then of course we can open that up, for questions and answers.
All right, we'll turn it over to you guys then. Thank you.
This is so annoying. All right, stand by 1 second. I'm going to share a couple of things on the screen here, and it just may take a second to move from item to item.
Are these things we have on board docs, Nancy? And Adam, if you'll tell us the files that you're sharing on the screen, I think we have hard electronic copies on our board docs as well. So
perfect. We're gonna start with the map part first, just to have that shared up there. And go ahead whenever you're ready, Victor.
Yeah, I'm just going to go over some of the basic things to look out for in this redistricting process. As you know, the census released this data much late, so we're working with a much more compressed time frame than a normal redistricting cycle. I'm going to start out here just going over some of the considerations for your prelim plan. So in developing this, the first requirement you're going to want to look for is the one person, one vote. That falls under the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment. And pretty much what this states is if you have a district that has 100 people in it and you have a district that has 200 people in it, that district that has 100 people in it is going to have more of a voice than that district with the 200 people in it. So the purpose of redistricting is pretty much to balance that out so everybody has equal representation. So you're going to want 150 in one district and 150 in the other. That way everybody's vote counts, or everybody's voice is heard the same. We are still under the Voting Rights Act, and that's primarily Section 2. And this Section 2 protects the interests of any racial minority groups. Another thing to keep into consideration is any other court decisions. Redistricting decisions, there's many court decisions still that have to be made on that. So just be cognizant on any sort of developments as it pertains to that. And of course, any federal and state laws that are already set in place when making a preliminary plan. Another thing that we recommend is following a set of traditional redistricting principles. These redistricting principles include having wards that were drawn contiguously. So that means that you can't have a district that hops over another district. It has to be all one piece. It has to be contiguous. And then another thing that you need to take into consideration is the minimization of dividing any voting precincts. This causes any burden for voters' registration offices. It also causes public confusion when it pertains to voting. So we try to minimize that as much as possible when creating these plans. It's not going to be completely avoidable. You may still have some division of voting precincts. We just try to minimize that as much as possible. Another thing to look for is geographical compactness. So you're wanting to make sure that these districts pass an eye test. You have to be able to look at the map, see that district and say, hey, this district is compact enough. You don't have legs going out on each side. It looks compact. Another one that you need to focus on is, when feasible, drawing in any communities of interest. These communities of interest need to be predefined up front, though. A community of interest can be anything from a school board, it can be anything from a attendance zone. Any cohesive group that you can define needs to be predefined up front. Looking at some of the court decisions, it seems as if the courts don't take too kindly of you drawing a plan and then it getting challenged, and then later on saying, oh, well, I meant that to be a community of interest. It needs to be predefined up front. The last section of that is to just be drawn to comply with any court decisions, as I stated. Do you have? And also, yes, citizen input is public input is a huge part of this process. We need to hear the voice of the public. Redistricting plans, it's a very interesting process, and public input is always one of the most vital parts of this entire thing.
So I believe we have some other.
We are going to now roll over to what would be this would be, and again, I apologize for providing snippets of the report that we do. This was put together a little quicker than anticipated. If you would go ahead and open up or have in front of you the graph that's related to, and I'll show you here in just a second. The graph that you can see up here on the screen. And we'll talk about the deviation line here in just 1 second. Basically, what this provides you is an overall statistical breakdown of your current districts with respect to the 2020 census data that we have. All of those districts that are outlined in blue are all districts that fall under the deviation, and you're trying to get your target population per district that you're looking for is 4,282 people per district. Or sorry, 45,282 people per district. That gives you your target population. RFA recommends a deviation of 5%. However, that deviation can go up to 10%. So there's a little bit of quote unquote leeway right there. However, if you go above 10%, that's considered non-compliant. So again, when with respect to the redistricting processes, keep that in consideration with respect to the overall population per district. I'm going to share another one here. Oh, hang tight. Share another one here in just a second. This one's going to be again the statistical breakdown based off of your actual deviation itself. Those districts that fall above and below those individual that 45,282 persons per district. If you take the highest value in that and the lowest value in that based off of those percentages, you get your overall deviation, which is 27.18%. So therefore, and like everyone on the call is very well aware of, redistricting is a must for Greenville School District.
Yeah, that's fine. This is just a more intricate breakdown of all of the statistics that we use in this. I'm going to first go over some of the geographical components to how we establish these numbers. You have a geographical hierarchy that we use. The largest geographical unit is the tract level. Medium level is going to be your block group layer, and your smallest level of geography is going to be your block layer. When the Census Bureau releases this information to us, we receive the information at this block layer. That is the smallest form, as I said, and this is how we get these statistical breakdowns. You have a population total for each of these demographics broken down at that level. So these include Hispanic, non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic DOJ black, and non-Hispanic other race. These are all the racial fields that are categorized in this breakdown, and this is what we use in calculating these percentages. If you look at the bottom of that, that is just going to be your voting age population totals. We focus more on the top graph, though, as in respect to redistricting. As you can, and another thing that needs to be noted is any majority minority districts need to remain relatively the same. We're not trying to rewrite record books here with any of the redistricting process. We're trying to make as minimal movements as possible through this process.
However, due to the growth within the county itself, we do fully understand that there are going to be significant impacts around the school districts and the county itself with respect to these redistricting processes. With that being said, I know that it's relatively short, but it's very succinct with respect to the data that we are providing to you. I guess we're kind of at the point of opening it up onto the floor for questions.
Thank you guys for the presentation. Before we take questions from the board, could we just maybe have somebody walk us through the timeline again of how we're going to get from here to a map that we need to approve?
Sure. General timeline is, and again, speaking with Mr. Webb, I believe, Revenue and Fiscal Affairs has three different options available, and I believe that option one is going to be what the school district opts for, which is Revenue and Fiscal Affairs handles the entire redistricting process as a whole. Revenue and Fiscal Affairs is a neutral party agency, so we don't take any of your local politics into consideration. We look at numbers only and try to stay within the purview of the outline that Victor provided just a couple minutes ago. With that being said, it's my understanding also that school districts only take a total of two readings, I believe. Or is it three? It's dependent upon how many readings it takes, in order for you to pass, your ordinances across the board. Currently, we're working with 35 counties, 18 municipalities, and a couple of special purpose districts. And so there's some differentiation between all of those with respect to how many readings it does take. So with respect to that, it takes 3 readings, and let me just ask a general question. When is your next election? I apologize for not knowing this.
Our next election will be in the general election next fall, so November.
Okay, so your redistricting process, finalization of maps, needs to be completed prior to filing, which is March 16th.
Well, we don't have primaries, so I think our filing is in the summer.
Okay, if your filing is in the summer, this of course gives you a little bit more, and again, I'm just using it based off of what county councils go through at the same time, so I apologize for that. Yeah, so as long as your map has been finalized prior to your filing date for your school board members, that's the only stipulation on it.
And I will say, 10 years ago, we were able to get this finalized by our board, I believe in January, 10 years ago, submitted to the General Assembly in February, and then signed by the governor, I believe, in March. So that would be the same goal. And as Adam stated, like we did 10 years ago and worked fairly well, is that they're going to help us with the first draft of a plan, and then we will work on that draft. Once we are comfortable with that draft, bring it to the board and to the public, because public input is very important in the entire process, and we will work through that to make sure there's opportunity for public comment as well.
And the first draft ideally would be to us.
Yeah, and perhaps in Columbia you can can weigh in a little bit on this. I know you guys are busy, but perhaps in the next few weeks, there could be an initial draft that is sent to the district. Is that correct?
Yeah, and let me just be very honest with everybody on this call. Due to the number of inquiries and assistance that our office is providing, and again, the timeline, and I can appreciate you wanting to get this done as soon as humanly possible. Your timeline is a little bit more extended than a standard county council timeline. So if you can possibly work with us with respect to your overall timeline, pardon me. If you can work with us with respect to your overall timelines, that would be highly advantageous for our group here in Columbia. So, first of the year would be a little bit more ideal, with respect to our current workload.
So the timeline would be kind of relatively January-ish. We would see a first map, and then the board and the public would have opportunity to provide input on that, and then a final map would be created after that input is provided?
Most likely, and it could fluctuate as far as the timing depending on when they're able to get us the draft, and we certainly understand how busy you are as a department in Columbia. So, but generally speaking, that is the process.
And then that second map is the one that's actually brought to a board, committee of the whole, and board meeting to actually be voted on by this board.
Yeah, it could be that map doesn't change at all. It could be just that the public has the opportunity to comment on it, and there are no changes.
And then after it's approved by the board, so then the next step is it goes to the General Assembly? Is that where it would go next?
That's correct.
And then signed by the governor?
That's right.
And then there aren't any federal...
So that legal requirement for pre-clearance by the Department of Justice is no longer. Okay. I mean, obviously there are legal parameters still in play, Voting Rights Act as discussed, but pre-clearance does not occur.
Okay. Do you guys have any additional information you want to give us, or we'll just kind of open it up to questions if that's all right?
I don't think we have any other additional, just general guidelines with respect to what we've already presented.
This has been great, and it's really helpful. We have all three of the charts that you provided us and the map that you showed us, so everybody's got those. We'll stop here and maybe take questions from board members, and if you could please just introduce yourself when you have questions. Do any board members have any questions for our friends in Columbia? Do you have any questions?
Tell you what, while you guys are coming up with possible questions, one thing that we can provide to you, and again, I apologize for the tardiness of this, is just that general list that Victor went over, so that way you have your check boxes, that way you can review locally as we continue down this process, if that would be of assistance.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Doolin.
Thank you. Is there a computer program or a computer model that will spit out a proposed map based on how many residents each district needs to gain or lose? Or do y'all do this all by hand?
Great question. Really, really good question, seriously. There's nothing, we don't work in the I'll call it the AI world, right? We don't work in the automation world, so that way we can be more hands-on with this data. Because we have so many little sections and facets that need to take into consideration and be complied with, doing more or less most of this by hand is kind of an interesting way to look at it. It's not really by hand. Yes, we're using computer assistance, and it does make the process significantly faster. But with respect to having it automated, we don't necessarily deal with an automated process in order to do this.
Okay.
You have to take a number of other things into consideration. When you go through the redistricting process, looking at natural breaks. So say, for instance, if you have a waterway or a major highway or an interstate, so on and so forth, things that will naturally break, not only a community, I don't want to necessarily say a community, but a natural a natural break that would allow one district to form or not be part of another district. Those are things to take into consideration. And while some automation could happen, it's not necessarily the preferred method.
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
Thank you, Ms. Doolin. Any other questions from board members? Ms. Wells? Lisa?
Yeah, sorry, this is Lisa Wells. So I tried to write down the things that you said we needed to pay attention to again. So it's contiguous district, minimizing dividing voting precincts, geographical compactness, drawing in communities of interest, public input is vital. Is there something else I missed?
The final one would be majority minority districts, keeping those intact. So any district that has, I'll call it the DOJ black, if that's above 50%, we want to keep that above 50% with respect to the numbers itself. We don't want to drop that below 50% because that could be considered a cracking issue with respect to the actual district itself.
Okay, so I think previously we had 2 majority minority districts. If you look at the numbers now, they don't reflect majority minority districts in only one. Now we only have 1 currently. So I guess the question I have is, in looking at how you make those changes, are you looking to get back to 2, or were you looking to preserve 1? And maybe that's I don't know if that's a Doug Webb question or if that's a you guys question. You have legal counsel in the room. Well, let's take advantage of that.
We do. Stand by.
If it was a majority minority at the time, it is recommended to maintain a majority minority if possible. Natural population migration may make it impossible. It's a secondary standard to the primaries, the contiguousness, the compactness. Those are your primary targets. And then respecting the Voting Rights Act is a secondary consideration. So that is something that we will take into consideration. And if we can draw the 2 majority minority districts while still maintaining those primary factors, that would be the recommendation.
And I believe that would be District 25 and possibly 22. Yes? No?
23, 25 and 23.
Oh, sorry, 23. You're correct. Just to kind of clarify also with respect to the analysis that we provided to you all, the analysis is based off of your current districts, right?
Right.
And then it's based off of your 2020 census data. So again, we're not looking at 2010 census data, we're only looking at your 2020 census data. And that would also be one of those topics of consideration for council itself as a whole. So those are things that, again, I think as we tried to clarify, making those things part of your plan up front would be highly advantageous.
So county council, Greenville County Council, you did something similar with them, and I know they drafted a resolution to provide some direction, if you will. I don't remember us doing that last time in 2010. Is that something you guys are looking for? How are you looking for feedback ahead of that from the school board as a whole in that way? Or maybe let me ask a different way. Are other communities, councils or school boards providing that sort of upfront direction to you in looking at these?
Absolutely. If we're assisting with this, we can only really assist with the numbers as a whole. Having your geographic knowledge, and again, all of you have your own personal geographic knowledge of your areas, having that defined up front helps us to be able to put a plan forward. And comparing apples to apples, Greenville County as a whole, their county council, each one of the council members did provide us a list of, individual subdivisions, and we were able to get some of that data also, at least subdivisions from your county GIS department. But with respect to, some of that data and what we're looking for out of your, out of council as a whole, if you can predefine things to help us clarify how the redistricting process could potentially be impacted in your areas, that will help us get a good first initial pass on it.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes. So in the past, or I don't remember last time, but for instance, we could provide you GIS data for our attendance zones for schools that you could incorporate so that, to your point, you don't like to split neighborhoods. We have a lot of schools that multiple school board members represent, but you're saying you could incorporate that in smoothing some lines into your analysis if we provided that information, if our
Well,
folks
and
provided that?
let me chime in if I may, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, that, it's sort of, you can do both ways, sort of draft an initial plan and then tweak it based upon some of the thoughts of board members and revisions from there, or perhaps, as mentioned, you predefine certain items, but both are options, and I know 10 years ago we went with let's get a draft on the table and then revise from there to have a starting point for you as a board. But those are the two options.
You are correct. One other really big key factor, and I don't even know if we touched on it, is, you have 12 members. We have to make sure that when we go through this redistricting process, that your physical address falls within your district. We have run into a couple of areas within our state from other entities that we've been working with, that some of the proposed plans actually removes people from their districts. So there is some challenges with respect to being able to lay out some of the possible scenarios to move forward with the redistricting processes.
Okay, that's it for this minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Any other board members have any questions? Mr. Sudduth.
Pat Sudduth from District 18. I had a email from a person who attended a zoning meeting that was a 296 unit development on Highway 14. She said that it's zoned for woodland, and she says, I did not speak or question the board because you have to do that at the beginning. But they said that someone from the district said there was no problem concerning with adding this development. That was a surprise to me since Woodland has portables now. Who or what department checks this with new developers?
That would not be a revenue and fiscal affairs item of concern. I would think, depending, and again, I'm just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. That would either be if it's inside the city limits of your municipality that you're working with, it'd be one of their zoning questions or their planning department, and or the county planning department if it falls in unincorporated portions of the county.
So the school district would be able to supply me that answer.
Yes, sir. That'd be our planning and demographics department, Mr. Sudduth. We'll get you an answer to that question.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your time.
Any other questions for Revenues Fiscal Affairs? I have one question. We talked about the variance of 5 to 10%. So on the chart that we have that has the gray and blue.
I'll put it up for everybody. Just stand by for 1 second.
So are we looking for a variance of 5 to 10% for each member of the board, or a total variance of 5 to 10% among all of them?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's total variance.
So on on the SD deviation, that range, that 27% has got to get down to 5 to 10%? Is that what we're talking about?
Under 10.
Okay.
So let's get that back up there.
So it's not just the individual board members who have a variance greater than 10%, but the entire board's number's got to get down to that under 10%.
Correct.
Okay.
Let me pull it back up and let's go over that. I think that's a good point to bring up. So with respect, and everybody can see this, correct?
Yes.
With respect to like district, and again, this is just, we're kind of just briefly looking over numbers. Nothing has changed. We're just, going at face value right here. District 17 and 18, I wouldn't probably touch at all because there's no real reason to touch them. They have an overpopulation of 126 and 247 respectively, and they again, if you look at their physical deviations between the two of those, you're under 0.5%. But the two that are really going to kind of throw things for a loop in this is going to be your District 22 and your District 27. And those are the two that really need to shift some population. Now, when you start to also take those other items into consideration, District 28 is over by 6,000 people. District 24 is under by 3,400 people. But then we start looking at like District 21, 22, 23, 25, 26, and they are all over, they're all over, 2,200, up to a little over 4,000 people under population. So when we start to do this process, we want to try to balance each one of your 12 districts out to make sure that your overall deviation, and again, we understand that the school district itself falls outside of the county lines themselves, so you have a differential population than just Greenville County as a whole. But we really want to try to make each one of these districts about as equal as possible, so that way we're at that one person, one vote that we talked about as one of the first key markers with respect to the redistricting process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Deal.
Hey, I have one other question. Somewhere on one of the charts, I saw something about population as a whole versus population of voters.
Correct.
And is it possible to use the population of voters or those eligible to vote as opposed to areas that have huge families where there are so many children, and those count as the population, but not necessarily as those eligible to vote that we would represent?
Sure, I understand the question. Unfortunately, in redistricting, you use the total population because we currently we cannot forecast based off of this data on how many, we'll call them children now, but how many children over the course of the next few years will go above the age of 8 or basically be able to vote in the next election cycles. So therefore, using your total population is actually more beneficial than using your voting age population. Voting age population is current population as it was conducted by census when they did their census work last year. So if we're gonna, and again, if we had the tools to be able to do this, to forecast what the voting age population is now with respect to when the data was actually tallied up, we would definitely see some statistical shifts across all of those percentages on your bottom voting age population graph or chart. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from any other board members? Ms. Wells.
This is Lisa Wells from District 28 again. So just one more, kind of talk me through for a minute. You mentioned that you have had situations where, I guess in rural parts of the state, it's been difficult to keep people in their districts. And I know with us, we tend to cluster closer to the center of the county. at least in the southern, from mid-county down to the southern end. So understanding the logistics of keeping us in our districts and knowing that particularly District 27 and 28 basically are going to have to shrink to allow for more, to take voters and put them in some of those other districts. I think the scenario you're working with, it'll just be a shifting and shrinking without having to look at the potential to move any of us out of our districts, right? I mean, you said that's a primary requirement as well, that you have to keep us in our district. And is there a scenario where you'd come back and say, hey, this doesn't really work?
I'll be honest with you, it doesn't necessarily occur in our rural counties either. This actually is a little bit more, at least in terms of what I've seen recently, this is actually occurring in a little bit more suburban populations where you have a concentration of folks. At the end of the day, I mean, you're a representative for that district, and whether you're going to run in the next term or not, one of the things that we have to take into consideration is your current physical address with respect to the district that you represent. We have to stay in the purview of that. So therefore, in order to create a redistricting scenario or draft for you, we have to migrate the data how we need to do it in order to keep you in your district. So in terms of answering your question, I mean, our goal is we have to it's not even a goal, we have to keep you in your district. You're a current representative for that district. Getting you out of that would not do well for us.
Okay, well, and I know last time, and it's evidence really even now, a lot of us are kind of either on the edge of our district, and I remember the first map we did 10 years ago had me in particular, I was at the very edge of my district because they were trying to kind of make that line, and we worked out of that because I wanted to be a little more centered in my district. So, okay, that's good. So it's really in those areas of high growth is where you're seeing that problem exist.
Correct.
Okay.
It would be just easier if everybody would move into the center of the district. But I mean, it is a challenge. It really is. And this is, nationwide, everybody's going through this. This is not just a South Carolina, Greenville County School Board district thing. This is nationwide. We are having, folks like myself and all of you on the call are having the exact same discussions, dialogue, questions, and answers. So, yeah, it's a challenge. Unfortunately, very fortunate for all of us, we only do this once every 10 years.
Right, yeah. Okay, so then my last question, you mentioned that we could let you know if there were communities of interest that we wanted considered, but do you guys already have that in play so that you're paying attention to what communities of interest there may already be, like, the town of Simpsonville and the town of Fountain Inn? Do you already have?
And I can respect your question, and the challenge for us is we are, an hour and 25 minutes south of you. Yes, while we kind of understand some of those things, having it defined by each one of you with respect to working with your colleagues that are your neighboring, that are your neighbors, would be more beneficial, again, having it come directly from the source itself.
Okay, and then do y'all have any GIS data sets online that, like heat maps of population or anything like that the public can access to use and pull down and work with?
I can appreciate that, and give me 1 second, I'm going to share something else with you in here in a second. Sharing that.
You would get the
So on
initial.
rfa.sc.gov, if you go down here to public dashboards, click to view census dashboards, there's a number of dashboards that we've put together that highlights a number of these. Now, what I will say is they're county-driven, so we don't necessarily, and we don't have this in here right now, but we don't have the school districts in here. But what I will say is you can at least get kind of a sense on where those population shifts have come. You can actually look and drill down to the block level data, which is what we will be using in order to conduct the analysis on our end.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Great question, too.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thank all three of you for your time. We really appreciate it. This was a lot of great information. I know you've got to do this all over the state, so thanks for spending some time with us today.
You're welcome. And if anybody has any questions, the one thing that we do ask, Mr. Webb has been our primary point of contact. If we can just direct those questions, excuse me, direct them through Mr. Webb, and then Mr. Webb can send them to our office. Because of the sheer volume of communication, having one point of contact for your organization really does kind of help minimize it, or help decrease the amount of communication, but also increase the communication going back out to you, just having just one point of contact. But if anybody else has any questions, if you can just direct it to Mr. Webb and he can shoot it down to us, we'll tackle it.
Thank y'all again.
Thank you. You all have a great rest of the afternoon, and happy holidays if we don't talk to you sooner.
Thank you, too. Mr. Chairman, that will conclude item 4.02. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Wells has a
Just, I guess, a question to kind of follow up on what that is. So what I heard is we could provide individual comment ahead of them drawing the maps. But I just want to be clear on all of us knowing what we can do, or what we want to do, or do we want to collect.
Mr. Lewis, continue.
Sorry, we did not conclude item 4.02. Ms.
Oh,
Wells.
well, okay. Either, yeah. So I guess I want to. Are we clear on if we have comments specific to any of these things that we want to point out? What I heard him say was we would provide that list to Mr. Webb, and Mr. Webb would share that. And so that's an individual action. We're not looking to, like county council did, try to come up with any sort of collective direction on here are the 5 things we want to be considered in the process for the initial map. Is that, I'm looking for clarity.
So just for clarity for how it's been done in the past.
Well, I'm not asking about how it's been done.
Just to compare, and if I may, and then certainly it can be modified. But 10 years ago, and looking back at my files, 20 to 30 years ago, the last 3 times, the state provided us that initial draft map. From there, individual board members provided feedback on that draft, community of interest, things of that nature. That draft map would then be revised and then provided to the full board for consideration, public comment, the whole process, make sure it's as transparent as possible, an opportunity for input. So that's how it has been done for the last, to what I remember, I was here 10 years ago, did it then, as well as 2 times prior to that. However, as the state mentioned, there are both options that could be done.
So because lots has changed in the last 10, 20, 30 years, both in what we're required to do and what the legal requirements are, and in just the technology that you're used to able to inform decisions. So that, coupled with the fact that, again, I saw that county council laid out some priorities for here's what we want to consider, and they did it collectively as a body. That's why I'm asking, should we consider doing something different than what we did for the last 30 years?
And that would be the board's decision.
So that's the question, Mr. Lewis.
you have any additional comment? You good? Okay. Mr. Sailors.
I'm not very comfortable in the fact of offering commentary until I've seen something to comment about. I think that getting the map in advance, a draft, and our offering input, either collectively or individually, is fine. But I don't see any foreseeable need to make significant changes in my district, but it all has a domino effect, which we addressed 10 years ago. But where we made some dramatic changes 10 years ago. So I personally would prefer to see a draft of something and then let us collectively figure out how we want to deliver our concerns back to the state office in the appropriate manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Any other board members have any questions? Mr. Meek.
Thank you. I don't understand, did county council already have a draft map before they did the resolution?
Mr. Webb.
I believe they did because they have a party primary.
Yeah.
We do not. That's why we're at the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah, I realize that they have been working on their initial draft map. I do not know if their predefined criteria was before or after, but it was almost simultaneous with those two.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Any other questions or comments before we end this item? Hearing none, that concludes item 4.02 for real. And I turn it over to Mr. Meek.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Having no other items on the agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The motion carries. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Special call meeting.